Hello everybody, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today we're returning to War in the Pacific, Admirals Edition, in our Let's Play series with Lieutenant Rainbow Slash, our play-by-email series against Lieutenant Rainbow Slash. It is March 29th of 1942 in this game, and, I guess we'll see what happens here. We did just have a couple of light cruisers off the coast of Java that were hit by Japanese air attacks, so we're trying to get them out. We're also trying to make sure that the 6th Australian Division continues unloading at Rangoon, and we're continuing to try and slow down the Japanese invasion in the Dutch East Indies, specifically on the island of Java, as they attempt to sort of wrest control of the oil supplies from us in that sector of the front. They're unloading troops on Sabang, which is where we have a couple of Dutch regiments there. We had a naval battle here against some Japanese destroyers, in which case I think we set a few of them on fire, but they sank a few of our ships as well, and they're unloading more troops here. We're down to the second or third to last turn where they have the amphibious bonus, and so we'll see how that goes. Meanwhile, looks like our light cruiser is being intercepted by the Japanese. I had hoped to get these guys out of here. These are the guys who got hit by Japanese air attacks, so it does look like we've got a nighttime surface engagement. Our light cruiser is here on the right, Japanese forces on the left. It looks like they have a heavy cruiser, a light cruiser, and 3 destroyers here, so the Raleigh is probably toast. But we'll see. All right, so we'll fast forward through. You can see the heavy cruiser Suzuya, as well as the light cruiser Isuzu, and then 3 Japanese destroyers by the looks of it, against 1 obsolete American light cruiser here. So let's go ahead and fast forward through here and see what happens. Oof. Well, we sank. 3 shell hits and a torpedo hit, and the Raleigh is going down. So her valiant effort to escape from Oosthaven failed. Meanwhile, the S-39 looks like she put a torpedo in the side of a Japanese destroyer there, so we might have just sunk a Japanese destroyer, if that's accurate, off the southern coast of Java. Huh. I didn't hear any bubbling noise, so that doesn't mean that probably means she may not have sunk yet. But at least if we did put a Mark 10 torpedo into the side of a Japanese destroyer, that's a pretty good thing. Japan doesn't have that many destroyers, and, a sub versus destroyer with a destroyer getting hit by a torpedo is always a good result if you're the side of the submarine. All right, so more troops unloading all over the Pacific here, south of Guadalcanal now, near Macon, which is north of Tarawa, the Reef Islands, north of Espiritu Santo. As a reminder, the Japanese have pushed far further south than they ever did historically. They've even taken New Caledonia, Espiritu Santos, New Hebrides. Those are all in Japanese control. But they are a little bit behind in sort of the Dutch East Indies, and they're a little bit behind in the Burmese theater as well. So things could be worse. Losing some casualties here, unloading to the east of Surabaya. And let's see, Coast Watchers, blah, blah, blah. All right, let's fast forward through here, see if anything happens with the air attack phase. Neuhauser, when you said we had a small victory, I sure hope it's a little bit more than just that destroyer getting hit by a sub. That was nice, but that'll be a little bit of a letdown if that's all we got in this turn. I guess it could be worse. Okay, some Japanese submarines here operating off the coast of Canada here, hitting one of our cargo ships. That's not great. We just lost one of them. I didn't have any escorts with them. They were just carrying supplies up to, like, Alaska and stuff. Pretty quiet so far. A lot of recon going on. Some Japanese sweeps over Batavia, as well as Surabaya with some Zeros. They've also got some Oscars flying over Oosthaven. Some Bettys hitting Surabaya. One destroyed by flak, and they destroyed some of our Dutch aircraft on the ground. Some Catalinas coming in here against some Japanese Zeros. I'm assuming they're attacking some Japanese shipping in the area, but they're getting hit by Japanese Zeros, a cap over something here. Are they going to get through the cap? No, they're not. So 4 Catalinas went in. I think they were carrying torpedoes, but it looks like 1 destroyed, 1 shot down, the rest turned back. 19 Nels attacking some isolated troops here on the southern coast of Borneo, as well as some troops near Port Moresby, which has also fallen to the Japanese. What are these guys bombing at Oosthaven? Are they just bombing the oil facilities there? That'd be real great if they want to destroy the port that they're going to end up taking over very soon. I'm assuming they were thinking maybe the cruisers would be in port, but if they want to do some damage to the facilities there, I will not complain at all about that. 30 Sallies hitting our troops west of Djambi. Just a whole bunch of Japanese air attacks on isolated Allied units, which is smart from a destroying, you know, just basically getting free training for your bombing crews. Meanwhile, we've got 6 bombers going after a surface task force here. Looks like there's a small Japanese screen of Zeros flying cap over it, but all 6 bombers make it through. And we're attacking a Japanese cargo ship here with 3 CW-22 Falcons and 3 Hudson 3As. And of course, nobody hits the broadside of a barn. So we don't lose any aircraft. We do suffer 1 aircraft damage, and the Japanese cargo ships go in unscathed. That's the end of that air operation phase. So I think we're moving into the air operation PM phase. So we've got 20 Japanese aircraft here with 40 Zeros. The carrier battle group here located east of Batavia. I think this is the Minikidu Butai, is bombing Oosthaven here. Again, if they want to destroy the port there, go ahead. 3 port fuel hits. We've got like 200,000 fuel or oil or something like that at Oosthaven. So if they're hitting the fuel depots, great. Destroy the fuel you're going to take because we have no troops there. Meanwhile, they're hitting the port as well. My carriers are in southern Australia at the moment, so I'll take a look at those in a second, Ivan. All right, 16 Sallies going after Sabang, so a lot of Army bombers hitting all over. Kind of trying to fast forward through some of this. There's just a lot of sort of scattered bombings, but not a lot going on. Meanwhile, we've got 4 D-7Bs, which are American A-20 Havocs, trying to get through to another Japanese landing force here at Semarang. 4 Japanese Zeros against 4 twin-engine light bombers. I would definitely give the edge to the Japanese, so you can see they just shot one of them down. One of them just withdrew low on fuel. A little bit of defensive fire going on here. Another Japanese fighter driven away. Yeah, Pascabar, I would say War in the Pacific is definitely not for everybody. Meanwhile, 3 of the Bostons are coming in here against the Japanese APD, and no hits. Great. Well, they made it through the fighter screen, but they didn't do any damage to the Japanese destroyer troop transport. That's what an APD is, a troop transport, basically. 6 more bombers. Looks like they're making another run out of Surabaya against this Japanese cargo task force in the Java Sea. Just a single Japanese Zero providing cover. We've got 3 Hudsons coming in on another Japanese destroyer. No damage done by that group. We did lose 1 Falcon. It looks like the 3 Falcons were turned back by the Japanese Zeros there, but no damage done. So a lot of ineffective bombing attacks. I'm going to guess that destroyer getting hit by one of our subs was the high watermark of the turn, unfortunately. But a pretty uneventful turn as well. Things could certainly have been worse. Dutch submarine getting attacked in the Mascar Strait, although there's no depth charges dropped on it. Yeah, bombing effectiveness. This is much more realistic in terms of how effective, or ineffective rather, bombing would have been in the Pacific Theater at this stage for the Allies. Yeah, the CW-22 is basically a trainer. You are correct. All right, Japanese bombardment attack at Guilin. They're trying to break through here in the southern portion of China to try and race north toward Guiyang and eventually Chongqing. But a bombardment attack. I'm fine with these bombardment attacks. They keep trying to hit us with their artillery, and they do more damage to themselves with counter battery fire than they inflict on us, so that's a good result. Deliberate attack at Sabang here. The Japanese have 2 infantry regiments ashore against 2 Dutch units, a battalion, and a regiment of troops. And that attack went pretty well for the Japanese, 2-to-1 odds. They reduced the fort by 1, down to level 1. They did take 315 casualties, but mostly just disabled troops. They didn't really lose anyone permanently. Neither did we, really, but they'll probably take the base next turn. Shock attack by an infantry regiment in central Sumatra actually did not go in the Japanese favor. They failed to push the troops back there, so that's a good result. Bombardment attack at Kaigan. And bombardment attack at Pamsong. This is actually an Allied bombardment attack here. They may not have enough troops to take that base. We actually have a pretty decent battalion there. And then our own bombardment attack at Sabang. Okay, they'll take this base here. They'll probably take a bunch of lightly armored bases. Bombardment attack at Ambon. They still haven't taken that. They really need to reinforce there, in my opinion. Pushing east a little bit from the New Caledonia foothold. Who's winning Pascabar? It's hard to say. The Japanese have pushed further than they did historically, Pascabar, but or Pascal Bar, or Pascal Bar. But they're also behind in Burma, which I think is going to be kind of problematic for them. And they haven't made as rapid success in China as they potentially could. So it's really a little bit early. They've definitely lost more casualties than Japan did historically, but you know, to be honest, the game allows Japan to take a lot more punches than historically was the case, at least with land and air units. Naval units, not so much. You have the historical naval units that you had. But your pilots, if you're smart with how you train them, don't attrit in the same way they did in real life. They still attrit, but not as rapidly. You can definitely maintain a strong and well-trained Air Force well into 43 if you're smart. Okay, so let's see. It looks like that was about it for the turn. So kind of an uneventful turn. We did put a torpedo into the side of a Japanese destroyer. I'll take that. I didn't hear any bubbling noises, so it doesn't sound like we sank it. Usually you get like a little sound effect anytime any ship sinks, where it's kind of like you hear like water like racing into a compartment kind of that indicates the ship sinking, or sometimes you hear some like sort of muttering of like crew members that's supposed to, I assume, indicate a sinking ship, which kind of ruins the fog of war element to the game a little bit. But we didn't hear that, so I'm assuming it's probably badly damaged if it's a destroyer that took a single torpedo, but not sunk yet at least. So let's go ahead and load back into the turn. Whoops. Okay. All right, so let's get in here. Okay, so we'll take a look here. Does it give us any indication that we sank anything last turn? If we go to ship sunk last turn, we lost the Crown City and we lost the Raleigh near Oosthaven and Victoria. So the Crown City was that merchant ship sunk off of Victoria near Vancouver. The Raleigh was sunk by the Japanese Heavy Cruiser Task Force south of Oosthaven. What happened to our other cruiser here? It looks like the Detroit made it out. She was the less damaged of the two, so it's probably a good thing we split that task force up. But it does pose the question, if he had heavy cruisers down near Oosthaven, does he have anything moving toward the Coast Islands or anything like that? We're almost done unloading our supplies. We're totally done unloading the 2 Australian infantry battalions here on Coast. So we've got about 75 strength there. Those 2 units are in combat formation, and they've got adequate supply for the moment. These guys are heading north. They're heading west off the map, so they're heading away from any direction where we might see his vessels. Same for these tankers, as well as these. So this is good. This means all the ships that are in the area that maybe he'd dart west and try and raid are actually pulling away, going in the opposite direction, and I don't think any of them are detected anyway, so he wouldn't even know that they're there. Yeah, and Omaha isn't very... you know, the Omahas aren't terribly valuable, but that's fair. Meanwhile, we've spotted the... I think this is the mini Kirubutai. It looks like there's Japanese light carriers and escort carriers, and maybe I thought we saw like one fleet carrier with these guys when we had a submarine attack. But you can see here, these guys are moving northwest, so up this direction. They could, I suppose, move through the Strait of Oosthaven and try and raid some of our shipping. That's possible. We have some mine layers coming up here to help defend Coast. We have a light cruiser task force, which was moving up this way. Maybe we'll reconsider that. I don't know how 3 light cruisers will fare against a Japanese heavy. They are better, I think. They're D-class cruisers. They've got a lot of 6-inch guns and dual turrets. What else do they have? C-class and D-class. They all do have radar, though. All right. What did they do to Oosthaven, by the way? So they bombed it. So you can see here that it's 5,400 fuel and 122,000 oil. I thought there was a lot more oil. I thought there was like 180,000 oil here. So if he really destroyed 30 or 40,000 oil with those air attacks, that would be pretty devastating for him. But I might have been misreading that. He did do 20 port damage, which is nice. Meanwhile, there's fighting going at Sabang, where we have about 8,300 fuel. I'm surprised we don't have it. I thought we had a bunch of oil here too, but I don't see any indication of oil storage here, so I'm not sure where that went. Oh, it's down here near Meaden. All right. You can see the 2 Japanese regiments, which are ashore here. This base may fall next turn. The fortifications were knocked down from 2 to 1. The defenders lost a good deal of their AV, about 30 AV on the regiment. So we'll see if we can hold out there much longer. We've got some supply on its way to Port Blair. So some AKLs bringing some supply. I don't know where they took system damage from. Are they out of fuel? Doesn't look like it. In any event, they're heading to Port Blair to get a little bit of extra supplies to the troops there, which are very low on supplies. Japanese landed some paratroopers who have been stranded here, but our own troops need supplies to keep fighting. Meanwhile, no Japanese air attacks at Rangoon, which is good news for us. You can see here we've got about 9,000 soldiers or so, about 9,500 soldiers left on these transports from the 7th Australian Division. I'm assuming most of those are support at this point, so 104 motorized support on this transport, which is currently not docked, so we might want to look and see if we can dock them. Meanwhile, this other task force here is also not docked, and if we take a look at these guys, what do they all have? I'm guessing it's mostly support. So some 25-pound artillery pieces, some Marymount Harrington, which I think are some armored vehicles, motorized support, 25-pounders, motorized support. So we really need to get these guys docked so they can use the cranes here to unload. It does look like these guys, this task force is docked, right? Yeah, so these 4 troop transports here are almost done unloading, and it looks like there's a lot of motorized support on these guys that's still unloading. If we take a look at the 6th Australian Division, or 7th Australian Division, sorry, which is the division that is being unloaded in the port, all of their infantry sections, I believe, are ashore, all of their Bren sections, all of their AIF combat engineers, all but 4 of their Vickers sections. Very few of their 2-pound anti-tank guns are unloaded, though. Very few of their 40mm Bofors, their 3-inch mortars, or their 3.7-inch mountain guns. Sorry, the mortars are unloaded mostly. The 25-pounders are more than half unloaded, but there's still about 15 of them or so that are still left to unload. Engineers and engineer vehicles are unloaded. Well, not the engineer vehicles, but the engineers. Support is unloaded, and then a good chunk of the motorized support. So really the critical elements of the division are ashore, but there are still pieces of it left to come ashore. So, anyway, so that's the situation there. How are the P-38s at Mandalay doing? Great, only 2 of them still repairing. So we've got these guys set to 100 feet, minimum range, training at 100. So you can see here we got some training on strafing by the look of it, and some defensive flying training here. When these numbers are green, means they went up last turn. These pilots are damn experienced. We've got Pappy Boyington leading the group, Major Pappy Boyington. He already has 7 kills as his work with the ABG group. We've also got another ace in C.H. Older, and then we've got B.C. Foshi, R. Layer, and K. Jernstadt, as well as L.S. Bishop and W. Gibbon. So quite a few aces in this AVG group, the American Volunteer Group, which has been outfitted with P-38s and transferred to Burma. Meanwhile, the B-17s here are working on getting up. It looks like the vast majority of these aircraft are ready for combat now. We've got 29 aircraft ready for combat. I think some of them are back at Lido still, right? Yeah, we've got one that's being repaired at Lido, and then I think we might still have some in Java. One here. Let's transfer these guys via rail because their base is about to get overrun. So it'll take 4 days for any aircraft that's transferred via rail to be ready to fly again. Meanwhile, 2 more of these guys are ready to fly, so we'll go ahead and send these guys up to Mandalay so that us get up to 31 B-17s at Mandalay. Any other planes or B-17s down here that are ready to fly out? One more of these guys is ready. So we bring 3 more B-17s into Mandalay, with 4 heavy bombers staying back at Batavia still repairing. And I think that's all the B-17s in any event. So that brings us up to 32 B-17s, all of them ready for combat. So we could try and make a decent-sized raid with these guys. Probably should start their training as well, now that all their aircraft are up and running. If we take a look at some of these units, OOBs, these guys have some aircraft left at Batavia, but I would like to draw some replacements into some of these groups here. There's 5 aircraft ready. They can have up to 8. So we could pull 3 of these B-17s in. So let's do that. We'll pull 3 in from the pool, so we'll have 3 more repairing. Are there any others that we can pull some reserves in? Pull 1 in here. I think the rest have aircraft still sort of sitting back. So that'll actually give us up to 36 B-17s once those aircraft are repaired. Where do we hit them? Well, we could try and bomb Bangkok, which has some oil facilities, definitely has some air bases. We could try and hit their ground forces at Mulman, where it seems like they're trying to build up some strength. Although if they decide to attack us frontally from Mulman, I think that's a mistake. The right approach is to come over the mountains from Chiang Mai, where you can flank our forces in Pegu pretty effectively. But that's what I would do. Meanwhile, there are some Japanese troops that we're spotting here south of Luchou. I don't know if he thinks we're lightly defended here or not, but we do have at least enough to hold off against one Japanese division in good terrain, also with some dug-in troops here at Luchou. So, also that terrain is... Oh, it is clear? That kind of sucks. That's clear terrain, huh? Are these guys moving? You might want to consider holding them in place. At least one of those corps, especially since it is open terrain. 6 Chinese corps resting from their battle east of Guilin. Meanwhile, they've got 72,000 troops and 458 guns against our forces here, but we've got quite a few assault units here, some Chinese corps. Meanwhile, in Sian, we did pull one of our units back to being just adjacent to Sian. So we've got about 2,200 troops just south of Sian. We are pulling troops to the east of Sian back into this hex as well. And we're going to begin a withdrawal north into the mountains in this area, a slow fighting withdrawal, because we do have 22 Japanese units moving southwest along this railroad here, which will flank and drive us back through some easily assaulted terrain here. So we're going to pull back from south of Sian to defend in the mountains a little bit further north to help maintain this force in good defensive terrain. Does the super high mobility doctrine of the Japanese in World War II come into play in this game? I guess that depends on what you mean by super high mobility. I mean, the Japanese took Singapore and they were able to easily flank our positions here. They are able to use, so if we take a look here at the road system, if they put troops here southeast of Pegu, they can, or east of Pegu, they can actually bypass Pegu by moving to this rail line north of Pegu, and then they can use the multiple roadways and rail lines in Burma to kind of flank any strong defensive position that the Allies may set up here. Rangoon is easily flanked and isolated, so I think the game does a good job of modeling the historical Japanese advances. And certainly the game models rapid amphibious transport. The Japanese have taken a vast swath of the South Pacific, tons of small little islands as well. And even New Caledonia and the whole Espiritu Santos group, including New Hebrides in this area as well. So we're holding in Fiji. We've got a very strong position at Nadi and Suva in Fiji. And then we have some troops in American Samoa as well. So this is sort of where we're holding the line. And then we've got a couple of outposts in Norfolk and whatnot. And obviously we're building up New Zealand. But the game definitely represents logistics in a way that I've never seen any Pacific War game do before, very authentically. Because while the Japanese have taken New Caledonia, it is at the absolute end of any sort of ability of Japan to supply. And if Japan was trying to make a play for New Zealand, that would be an absolute logistical nightmare because every single ship is modeled, and as you move ships, they consume fuel, and Japan has to take the Dutch East Indies pretty quickly, otherwise they do start to run their industry dry of fuel. Fuel is represented in game, supply is represented in game, and then you have, so supplies like bullets, food, guns, that stuff, and then fuel is obviously fuel, ship fuel specifically, aircraft use supply. And then you have resources, which sort of represent just everything resources, and you've got oil as well. So, like, Palembang is definitely the most oil-rich section on the map here. It produces up to, I think, usually it produces up to 900 oil per turn. And then it has refineries there that can refine that oil into supply and fuel up to 1,000 per turn. But there is a fair bit of damage that was done to some of these facilities as they took those bases and drove us back. It's a little bit early, Ivan, to know if Rainbow's showing any different strategies yet. He's only been in command for about a week, maybe a little bit less. So it's hard to make up some of that stuff in terms of, like, being able to tell how different his strategy might be or not. Meanwhile, the 1st Middlesex Battalion has been reformed. They have drawn one Vickers section, some motorized and some support. They don't even have infantry in their TOE, just Vickers. Do we want to try and give these guys replacements? I guess. Did we get more troops somewhere? Or is that... I think that might be a couple turns away till we get those British infantry battalions. Let's take a look here. What do our ground reinforcements look like? Well, that's air groups. What do our ground reinforcements look like? So if we go ahead and we take a look here... Actually, days until arrival. So in 2 days, we're going to get the 8th Marine Defense Battalion. We're going to get the 9th Marine Regiment in San Diego. We will get the 14th, 16th, and 23rd British Infantry Brigades, all coming in Aden, as well as the 45th Recon Regiment. So we're basically getting a division of British troops in 2 days. We're also getting the 26th Indian Division at Madras, and we'll get the... There's one more. The 24th U.S. Separate Infantry Regiment in 5 days in San Francisco, the 147th Separate Infantry Regiment in 7 days in the eastern U.S., and then the 46th Chinese Corps will arrive in Chongqing in 9 days. That's a nice size corps there. That'll be arriving. 32nd Infantry Division for the U.S. in 23 days at San Francisco. 80th Chinese Corps in 22 days in Chongqing for the Chinese. Again, that'll be a nice little reinforcement there that we'll get. I think those are destroyed corps, though, so they won't come in with a lot of heavy equipment. Meanwhile, in terms of ship availability, if we take a look here, what do we have coming up? Some submarines, 2 days, an oiler in 2 days, a corvette in 2 days, troop transport in 3, destroyer in 4, 2 cargo ships in 4, a tanker in 5. We don't get a lot of heavy stuff for a while still. I think our next carrier is 29 days away. The British Illustrious, we're still 72 days away from getting the USS Wasp. Battleships, we get the USS North Carolina in 72 days at Balboa. Heavy cruisers, we get 2 heavy cruisers in 16 days. Well, 2 cruisers. We get the Atlanta in 16 days, Dhaka. And then we get the heavy cruiser Devonshire in 16 days at Cape Town. If we take a look at the British ships repairing in Cape Town, we've got a couple of battleships. The Prince of Wales and Repulse were not sunk as historical. The Repulse will be ready in 39 days. Prince of Wales in 253 days. She's still a ways out. Yeah. All right. So, meanwhile, our troops in Bataan, we did drive back 2 Japanese divisions here at Clark Field. It says he has 8 units here, but I don't believe that. Unless he pulled new troops and, like, flew them in via transport. I think he probably broke up his 2 divisions there to kind of give an illusion of strength that he has more men than he does. We are trying to march our force out of Bataan to pursue him into Clark Field. It is very difficult terrain to fight in. But we're about halfway there, so we're probably about 3 or 4 more days away from arriving, depending on how much harassment he gives us with his air units. We're very low on supplies, but the units themselves have all the supplies they need for a fully effective attack. You can see none of these supply icons are red, which means they're fully supplied, or at least adequately supplied. You can see supplies required. This unit has twice of what it's required, so it's carrying quite a bit of supply compared to what it needs for at least an attack or 2. But we won't have any reserves if we fail in our attack. We're gonna chew through what little supply we have left in this counteroffensive in March going into April of 42. Meanwhile, the Allied carriers here are on the southern tip of Australia, so we did have some oilers arrive here, and we replenished our carrier task forces with oil. So these guys are all pretty much full up with oil and fuel and whatnot. And so we could, now the decision is sort of where do we want to send the Enterprise and the Yorktown? Where do we want to send the Indomitable and the Saratoga? So we've got, I think, 5 total fleet carriers in this area. Yeah. So what do we want to do with them, right? We could sail them north to try and get involved in and around the Java Sea, maybe protect some of our sea lanes, protect Coast Islands if the Japanese do drive west, or drive up north into the Bay of Bengal to help defend Rangoon, where we have quite a strong Allied Air Force based out of Rangoon. Or we could sail them east to protect our supply line with Australia and the Japanese potentially attempts to do anything there. I haven't really seen any sign of the Japanese carrier force. I don't know what these 2 ships are moving west, but I haven't seen any sign of the Japanese carrier force for a while, really. So they could be refitting and upgrading, but I'm not really sure where they're at. What's this? Some CSs, which are float planes, battleships, and heavy cruisers. I wonder if this is his... It says they're moving northeast, so probably toward Rabaul. This may be a misidentified task force. If you remember, 2 or 3 days ago, he bombarded our troops north of Moresby with some heavy cruisers. So I'm kind of guessing that this is the task force that's moving in that direction. What are the 2 DC-2s doing in Rangoon, Sean Mack? They had been pulling out of the northern tip of Sumatra. So we did have sort of a troop convoy situation where we're pulling troops out of Singapore into Sumatra and then into Burma. So these guys are probably part of our air transport wing that was here. So we've got actually 6 DC-2s located here. The rest of them are at Lido. So we'll transfer these guys up to Lido to try and help fly supplies from India into China. Okay. Some Skytrains. Some Blenheim 4s. Some Hurricanes are actually up there. We could bring them south if needed. But, yeah. By the way, not Tony 420. Thank you for the Prime sub a little while ago. Free on E-River. Thank you for the follow. And 101st Vader's Fist and Underdog Marco. Thank you for the follows. What are our float planes doing in Batavia? Well, they had been pulling troops into Batavia. They still are. So they're working on pulling the Gull Battalion, some Australian troops that we sent into Celebes to reinforce that island against the Japanese. So we do still have, it looks like, 9 infantry squads here that are cut off here by the Japanese because the rest of the island has fallen. If we take a look at the rest of the Gull Battalion, it looks like 7 of the 34 assault value has already been is still at Colac. At this base we were just looking at. The rest of the battalion here has been pulled into Batavia, so 21 sections of infantry, some Brens, some combat engineers, some anti-tank guns, all of those things, into Batavia to help the defense against the Japanese there. The fort levels here are getting close to level 4. Hopefully the Japanese don't send in heavy bombardment units that would knock that down quite a bit. But so far, we're building up sort of our own Bataan-type fortress here on the northern tip of the island of Sumatra. We've already maxed out supplies requested to try and pull as much of the supply from the south, sort of oil and supply-producing facilities as we can. You can see we pulled most of them out of Surabaya. We've got 2,200 supplies left. We probably should pull some of these air units can fly out, but we can also transfer them via rail up until the point where this base falls to the Japanese. This base will probably fall in the next turn. So that's probably something we want to try and pull them out now. We do have 1 sub here, the S-41. A lot of Japanese shipping in the Java Sea. Is there a way to lower the quality to 360 or 10180p? D Thunder Tower, I think it's up to Twitch. Honestly, I'm not a Twitch partner yet, so until I am, I don't get priority on encoding options, which means that sometimes the streams will not give me multiple encoding options. Hopefully, I will be a partner before long. My numbers are definitely where they need to be. And so I've applied for a Twitch partnership, but that can take a little bit of time, and I have to maintain, the 75-plus average, which is something we've been doing quite steadily for several weeks now. But we'll see. We'll see. That's one of the big perks of becoming a partner is you get the encoding options. Otherwise, it's kind of random based on availability and some other metrics that I don't fully understand. Nyla 73, Army Boy 941, and Erez Vespertine, thank you for the follows. So this kind of covers about what I wanted to show in War in the Pacific. So we are going to do some War on the Sea in a little bit. But before we wrap this stream up, is there anything else, or not this stream, but before we wrap this part of the stream up, is there anything else that you guys are interested in seeing? Again, this is a very unique game. I play it a fair bit on my channel, but it's not something that I think a lot of people are familiar with. You can see the air losses for the day. 3 Allied aircraft lost in air-to-air, 2 on the field, 2 to flak, 2 to op losses. We're claiming 2 Japanese op losses, 1 to flak, none in air-to-air or on the field. If we take a look at air losses today, 3 PBEM Catalinas attacking those Japanese ships that were hit by zeros as they went in. 2 of our DB-7Bs were hurt, those Bostons. The Japanese, we claimed 1 KI-27 Nate, which is kind of an obsolete Japanese fighter. 1 G4M Betty was lost to flak. Must have been a recon aircraft because I don't remember seeing any battles with that. Potentially 1-0. We also lost a SOC-1 Seagull, a different variant of the PBY-5 Catalina. An FK-51, a CW-22, an H-81A3, that's a Flying Tiger P-40 in China. So 10 aircraft to 3. You can see so far in the campaign, the Japanese have lost the Allies have lost 1,225 aircraft in the first 3 months of the war. Meanwhile, the Japanese have actually lost more than us. They've lost 1,462 thanks to our previous opponent, XTRG, being a little bit reckless with his bombers in and around Singapore and Clark Field, where we shot down like 300 to 400 planes in about a week. That was pretty rough for him. Pascal, not really. I mean, I kind of already showed our reinforcement schedule. Ship sunk stuff we've already looked at. I guess we should check ship withdrawals to see if anything has to be pulled out for other theaters. If we take a look at days, we're still 54 days from the next ship needing to be pulled out. We have 1,672 political points, so we could, at some point soon, if we want to, look at maybe switching the 27th Infantry Division's headquarters, so we could bring it into the Pacific Theater. So right now it's attached to the West Coast, which means it's restricted, so we can't put it on transports and bring it away from the U.S. It's sort of attached to home defense. But we have enough political sway at this point. It costs 1,593 points to change their headquarters to whatever we want it to be. So we could give it to the South Pacific, Southwest Pacific, to the Pacific Fleet or other things like that, and bring these guys out west. Also, if we want to take a look here, where is the Americal division here? They should be around here somewhere. Or Americal, however you pronounce that. Where are these guys? Oh, by the way, the Hermes is carrying a Wildcat squadron that we pulled out of Suva. So we've got a Wildcat squadron that's going to join the fleet. Are they a little bit further west, maybe? All right, this one's a little bit on the shorter end, but we're going to go ahead and wrap this episode up here. Not a super eventful turn. We did have one submarine, which had working torpedoes, so that's nice. So we probably crippled the Japanese destroyer with it, assuming there wasn't fog of war involved there. But in any event, hope you guys enjoyed yet another episode of War in the Pacific, Admirals Edition, my Let's Play series against, I almost said XTRG, my Let's Play series against Lieutenant Rainbow Slash. Hope you guys enjoyed. Until next time, this is the Historical Gamer, as always, saying thank you very much for watching, and until next time, I'm out.